Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wioya. Chapter 431. The Ruins of an Old Castle. Part 1. Whoosh. High above the clouds, the demonic beast Humwen, transformed into its true form, was flying at high speed. In Humwen's massive claws was a large carriage, carrying Mok Jiangun, Siep Chun, the first escort commander serving as the temporary head escort commander, Mong Muyak, the second escort commander, the masked Ma Are Hyan, the subduing demon and rogue monk Jia Jiamzhong, and 8 poison snake staff Gaiong Sao. They were heading towards the ruins of an old castle in the northern part of Shaanxi province. The distance was too far to travel by carriage or horse, and even using Qinggong would result in differences in speed between them, so they were riding the demonic beast Humwen, the fastest mode of transportation. Mong Muyak addressed Siep Chun, who had a somewhat sullen expression. "Don't tell me you're scared?" "Of course not. It's not like this is my first or second time riding." "Why would I be scared?" "Then, is it because you couldn't become a guardian even if it's temporary?" At Mong Muyak's words, Siep Chun coughed. Ahem. Before coming here, they had been assigned temporary positions for the sake of organization. Although the official structure of this new massive organization hadn't been fully established yet, these individuals had been recognized for their meritorious service in assisting Mok Jiangun and were given temporary positions as head escort commanders. However, since the 3 of you have outstanding martial arts, please take on the roles of guardians directly under the Lord until the official structure is established. The most experienced 8 poison snake staff Gaiong Sao was appointed as the Great Guardian, the masked Ma Are Hyan as the Right Guardian, and the rogue monk Jia Jiamzhong as the Left Guardian. This had secretly upset Siep Chun. He had been the first to recognize Mok Jiangun and wanted to become his right-hand man. But in reality, he was outmatched in martial arts and had to give up the guardian position to outsiders, which made him uncomfortable. At that moment, the rogue monk Jia Jiamzhong took a swig from his gourd bottle and said, "This monk has no interest in positions or titles, so if you want to be a guardian or whatever, you can have it." He. At Jia Jiamzhong's tone, which seemed like he was doing him a favor, Siep Chun's lips protruded in a pout. He had his pride, and having been outmatched in martial arts to become an escort commander instead of a guardian, if he were to accept this offer, what would become of his face? No need. Ahem. Hey now. Don't tell me you're upset over something like this? Not at all. I'll take that position by my own power soon enough, so no need for your charity. Hoo. Do as you please. Stop picking unnecessary fights and just pass me the alcohol. As much as you want. Jia Jiamzhong tossed the gourd bottle to Siep Chun. Tap. Catching it, Siep Chun, seemingly annoyed, started gulping down the alcohol. Hey! Are you planning to drink it all? While Jia Jiamzhong had no interest or desire for positions, he absolutely wouldn't yield when it came to alcohol. As if knowing this, Siep Chun continued drinking, looking like he might empty the entire gourd bottle. Watching them, 8 poison snake staff Gaiong Sao chuckled and said, Ho. Ah, to be young. Right now, they were heading towards a mission that might be even more dangerous than their escape from the Kaifeng imperial capital or the internal war of the Heaven and Earth Society. The secret society still hadn't revealed its full strength. They had only shown a part of it and used the opponent's power. If they were to reveal their full strength with determination, trials incomparable to anything before would follow. Yet, these people seemed not worried at all. Which meant, are they trusting him? This man. Gaiong Sao's gaze turned to Mok Jiangun. The sight of Mok Jiangun with his hair fluttering in the wind was indescribably beautiful. He too, in the past, would have felt anxious at the thought of potentially clashing with the full force of the secret society. However, at some point, he had developed expectations for this man. A belief had blossomed that no matter what, this man could overcome anything. Well, if even this old man feels this way, how could the young brothers be any different? Reflecting on himself through their appearance, Gaiong Sao straightened his posture. It might be better to focus on circulating his chi and preparing his mind and body to build fighting spirit rather than worrying unnecessarily. But just then, flinch! Mok Jiangun, who had been looking into the distance, suddenly stood up in the carriage. As they wondered what was happening, the demonic beast Human, which had been flying forward, suddenly stopped mid-air, flapping its wings roughly. Oh no! At that moment, the rogue monk Jia Jiamzhong, who had been trying to snatch the gourd bottle from Sib Chun, also frowned and surveyed the surroundings. They wondered what was wrong, when rumble. This is? They could now understand why the demonic beast Human had stopped mid-flight. This was because in the path where the demonic beast Human had been flying, there was a snake-shaped monster with wings as large as the dark clouds accompanying it. But the monster wasn't alone. Whoosh! As the wind gusted, other monsters appeared behind and on both sides. They were all bird-shaped Imimanjiang. A poison snake staff Guyong Sao clicked his tongue while holding his staff. To think we'd be caught here. They had thought that by moving at an altitude higher than the clouds, they wouldn't encounter any enemies. However, their opponents weren't simply humans. It was the secret society, which also controlled Imimanjiang. Kukuku. It seems we can't let our guard down even for a moment. Jia Jiamzhong then took out a vajra he had received from his old master, the venerable Gongzhan, at Shaolin Temple. Take these Dharma instruments with you just in case. It seems there's a demon mixed in with your group that you should be wary of. Master's foresight was correct. Following this master, he found himself frequently clashing with non-human entities. Thanks to that, things were never boring. After all, they were constantly risking their lives. Rumble. At that moment, 6 hands started to sprout from the body of the winged snake-shaped monster blocking their path. Seeing this, Mok Jiangun recalled something he had seen in the classic of Mountain and Seas. That was the demonic beast Baiyu of Mount Taihua in the western mountains. The classic of Mountain and Seas said that when this demonic beast Baiyu, 1, appears in the sky, a great drought occurs. This was because Baiyu would take away the dark clouds. Crackle. Lightning formed from the dark clouds was drawn into Baiyu's hands. Seeing this, Mok Jiangun gripped his sword-formed fingers and said, "Here it comes." As soon as he finished speaking, Baiyu, like a divine beast from mythology, hurled the lightning it was holding, and the Imimanjiang surrounding them all rushed in at once. A dark main hall. A long-haired man wearing a pure white uniform was kneeling on one knee in front of the stone throne, showing respect. The long-haired man with red lips, as if he had applied rouge, said, "We've found them." As expected, they were moving through the air. In response to the man's report, the shadowy figure sitting on the stone throne finally spoke. "If I had eyes, it would have been an interesting spectacle. What a pity." While monitoring the Heaven and Earth Society, he had lost the Imimanjiang that had been serving as his eyes. Because of this, he could no longer observe directly. However, the being who had grasped Mok Jiangun's side strength through the internal war of the Heaven and Earth Society predicted that they would definitely go there by air. That's why he sent forces that could fly in the sky. What would happen if they made even a single mistake in the sky higher than the clouds? He had missed an interesting spectacle. The long-haired man with red lips spoke with a voice full of confidence. "There will be good news soon." "Good news?" "Yes. Surely you don't think you can kill him with just that?" "Pardon?" "But..." "Enough. This won't kill him. Even if he's an unparalleled master, if he falls from that height, he won't be able to overcome the force of the fall. If he could die from something like that, there would be no need to worry about him." At the assertive words of the being on the stone throne, the red-lipped man showed an expression of incomprehension. The being on the stone throne snorted and said, "It's enough to have tied his ankles. The original purpose was not to kill them. It was to kill or damage the wings of the demonic beast Human, which could be considered their means of transportation. If that happens, they will no longer be able to move through the air." Even if he is an unparalleled master surpassing the seven heavens, considered the peak of the Central Plains martial arts world, it's impossible to move from where the Heaven and Earth Society is to the northern part of Shaanxi province in a short time using Qinggong. By the time he arrives, everything will be over. Both Ryu Soul's spirit and the forbidden technique to unite the soul and body will be in his hands. When that happens, he will taste despair. And that's not the end. When he returns to the Heaven and Earth Society, an even worse hell will unfold. The corners of the shadowy being's mouth lifted. Just then, someone entered the main hall. It was a middle-aged man with disheveled hair and covered in scars. Thud. The middle-aged man knelt before him, paying respects, and said, "My lord, I have finally brought what you desired." At his report, the red-lipped man smiled brightly and said, "It seems it has finally arrived. Mock gone. Bring it in quickly." Swoosh. At the man's words, the middle-aged man gestured behind him. Then, two masked individuals who had been waiting outside carried in a coffin and placed it in front of the stone throne. "Open it." At this, the masked individuals tore off the talismans attached to the gaps and opened the coffin lid. Inside, an incredibly beautiful woman was revealed, lying straight as if her acupoints had been sealed. She was Wai So-yun, the youngest disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society leader. Even with her eyes closed, her beauty was not diminished at all, causing a small gasp to escape from the red-lipped man's mouth. The man finally clasped his hands together and congratulated the being on the stone throne. "Congratulations, Mock gone." Finally, swoosh. But before he could finish speaking, the being on the stone throne raised his hand, stopping the congratulations. Then, the left armrest he had placed on the stone throne crumbled. Crack. At his sudden action, those in the main hall couldn't hide their bewilderment. They couldn't understand why the being was displeased when what he wanted had arrived. Then, the being on the stone throne stretched out his hand. Wai So-yun's body in the coffin floated up. In that state, as the being on the stone throne lightly waved his hand, "Stretch." Wai So-yun's facial skin began to stretch. They wondered what was happening, but as the stretched skin tore off, another face was revealed underneath. Rip. What? This is. The scarred, middle-aged man with disheveled hair couldn't hide his bewilderment. This woman was not Wai So-yun. Could it be? The middle-aged man suddenly recalled that when they had opened the coffin lid midway, Wai So-yun had briefly attempted to escape, having somehow released her sealed acupoints. They had recaptured her in less than a moment, so he didn't think it was worth reporting. But in that short time, when had she been switched with someone else? Just as he was feeling perplexed. Snap. The being on the stone throne snapped his fingers. At that moment, the bewildered middle-aged man's head exploded. Boom. The body of the middle-aged man with his head blown off staggered and then collapsed. Seeing this, the face of the long-haired man with red lips turned pale, unable to utter a word. This was because the middle-aged man was his subordinate, and he was the one who had promoted this operation. As he didn't know what to do, the being on the stone throne spoke in a heavy voice. "Move the residents immediately." The third eye on the forehead of the being on the stone throne could see it. The red connection linked to the spirit body of the fake Wai So-yun, whose human skin mask had been removed. Chapter 432. The Ruins of an Old Castle. Part 2. Huff, huff. A beautiful woman was wandering through the dark mountains. Her true identity was Go-chan, who had possessed the body of Wai So-yun, the youngest disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society leader. With clothes stained with blood, covered in wounds, and drenched in sweat from exhaustion, he looked around as if searching for something. No. Damn it, they said it would be on the mountain opposite the highest peak after going southwest for about 10 li without stopping, but where the hell is it? Despite being injured, Go-chan had used internal energy all the way here without rest and was now in no condition to move, his stamina completely depleted. Even though it was a possessed body, it still needed recovery to keep moving. Finally, after looking around, Go-chan entered a densely vegetated area that was inconspicuous and began to circulate his chi. Whoosh! As the cold energy coursed through his entire body, Go-chan inwardly clicked his tongue. How strange. He had heard of masters who could handle cold energy among the experts in the North Sea, a place outside the world where it was cold and snow-covered all 4 seasons. But how could a human body possess this level of cold energy? He had heard that his master, Mok Jaeung-eun, had helped dissipate the cold energy to prevent it from rampaging, but even without actively circulating chi, the cold energy was gradually increasing. How peculiar. This didn't seem like an issue with the physical body. It appeared to be related to the original spirit body that had fallen into a coma-like state when he possessed it. Just as he was pondering this oddity, rustle. Go-chan tensed up and stopped his chi circulation and breathing at the sound of footsteps. He was on edge, wondering if it was an ally or an enemy. At that moment, someone suddenly burst through the foliage in front of him. Wah! Ack! Even though his current body was exceptional, Go-chan had spent more time as a weakling in his past. Startled, he unconsciously fell on his backside while throwing a punch. Thud. White frost rose from Go-chan's punch, but the figure who had jumped out in front of him quickly twisted to the side, avoiding it. The energy from the punch froze the vegetation it touched. Crack! The figure looked at the frozen vegetation with disbelief, then touched it. The vegetation cracked and broke. At this, the figure clicked their tongue and said, "What's this? That body is quite powerful, isn't it? Shit. I thought my heart was going to stop." Recognizing the figure, Go-chan let out a sigh of relief and lowered his hand, still tinged with cold energy. The one who had suddenly appeared and startled him was none other than Seo Hyun, the leader of the 4 peaks, a member of the 5 peaks under Jang Nung Ak, the second disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society leader. More precisely, it was Gyu So-ha, one of Mok Jaeung-eun's ghost servants who had possessed Seo Hyun's body. Gyu So-ha grinned and said, "Were you scared? Were you scared? See, companion So-ha, isn't your joke going too far? Ah, sorry. It was just funny seeing you all scared and hiding." At Gyu So-ha's response, Go-chan clicked his tongue. Every time he saw this one, he felt that despite being a wandering ghost for a long time, their mental age didn't seem very high. "So you scared me in the middle of all this? What if I had accidentally hit you with my energy? Hey!" At that moment, Gyu So-ha approached Go-chan. Wondering what was going on, Go-chan found Gyu So-ha pinching his cheeks and saying, "Want to switch bodies?" At these words, Go-chan sighed. Gyu So-ha was always desperate to switch to any pretty body they saw. As Chong Ryong had said, this one was definitely not a man. If by any chance they were a man, then they must be per. You look like you really hate the idea. If you don't like it, forget it. TCH. It's a body we'll have to return anyway. If we aimed for this, the master would be very angry. That would be troublesome. Then let's hurry. If they notice that the one they recaptured is a fake with a human skin mask, they'll track us down to get the real one back. You don't need to worry about that. Are you too tired to sense the chi? Chi? Puzzled by Gyu So-ha's words, Go-chan released a suppressed aura and focused on sensing chi. He could feel the energy of hundreds of people not far away. They were all masters. It was enough force to engage in battle if necessary. To send such a force just to rescue someone like me, a mere former assassin. Go-chan was deeply moved. What had started with the ill fate at the Yun Mok Sword Manor had led to this, being cared for like a right-hand man. It truly touched his heart. Because of this, Go-chan felt he should be even more loyal to Mok Jaeung-eun. Seeing Go-chan's reaction, Gyu So-ha scratched their head. Make sure to protect that body at all costs. It seemed like Go-chan was misunderstanding something. But since it didn't seem to be a negative misunderstanding, it might be better to leave it be. No need to break his sense of gratitude, after all. Rumble. Whoosh. The demonic beast Human, flapping its torn wings, crashed to the ground. It tried to reduce its falling speed by fluttering its one remaining wing, but due to its massive size, the speed didn't decrease easily. Damn it. Ba. Mok Jayangun's subordinates, tightly gripping Human's wing feathers and claws, couldn't do anything in this situation either. Falling from a height higher than the clouds, it seemed the only option was to jump off at some point. As Human was nearing the ground, whoosh! Huh? At that moment, they felt Human's falling speed gradually slowing down. As the falling speed decreased rather than accelerating, everyone was puzzled. Looking down, they saw Mok Jayangun, who had somehow already landed on the ground, raising both hands. Ah! My lord! The expressions of those who had been pale with fear brightened. Meanwhile, the Great Guardian 8 Poison Snake Staff Gayong Sao and the Right Guardian Ma Are Hyan couldn't help but marvel at Mok Jayangun's profound inner energy. Ho ho! What impossible internal energy! To still have energy left. Unlike themselves, who had been barely able to fend off the attacks of the Imimanjiang due to the restricted movement at an altitude higher than the clouds, Mok Jayangun had single-handedly killed all the Imimanjiang with his formless swords. Yet, he still had energy to spare in his true chi, seeming even more powerful than during the internal war of the Heaven and Earth Society. It's utterly impossible to catch up. Ma Are Hyan, who had inwardly aimed to match Mok Jayangun's martial prowess, felt that this was so inhuman that he couldn't even think of catching up. Thanks to Mok Jayangun reducing their falling speed with his profound true chi, they were able to safely land on the ground. However, they couldn't be entirely happy. This was because the wings of the demonic beast Human, their means of transportation, had been torn, making it difficult to move through the air again. It would take some time for this to heal. TSK, this reminds me of the Shaolin Temple incident. At Siap Chun's words, everyone nodded in agreement. Back then, Human's wings had been injured by the attack of the Shaolin demon subduing monks, and they had to move on the ground until it healed. The situation was the same this time. The only difference was that during the Shaolin incident, they were in a position to avoid pursuit, while this time, they were in the opposite situation of having to pursue and catch up. Therefore, having a problem with their fastest mode of transportation meant a significant setback in their pursuit. Moreover, my lord, I don't think this will end with just one attempt. The Great Guardian Gayong Sao spoke with a voice of concern. Having worked closely with the secret society for a long time, he knew their habits well. They moved secretly, but once they were determined, they would pressure their target until they achieved their goal. Therefore, they would continue to try to prevent Mok Jayangun from heading to the northern part of Shaanxi province. The Great Guardian's words are correct. They'll probably try to tie us down. My lord, let us be the bait instead. At that moment, Mong Muyak offered an opinion. Siap Chun asked with puzzlement, becoming bait? You don't mean exactly what I said. We should split into two groups to draw the enemy's attention. At Mong Muyak's words, Siap Chun swallowed dryly, unable to speak. It was certainly a good strategy. The only problem was that those who split up to draw the enemy's attention would have to take on a greater risk, but still. So who's going to be the bait? After a moment of hesitation, Siap Chun asked directly. Mong Muyak looked at Siap Chun intently. You want me to be the bait alone? Why don't you just perform a ritual to send me to my death? Not alone, but you and me. And it would be good if one of the guardians here could join us. What? Anyway, we two are the weakest among us. It's better to have the guardians stay by the Lord's side. Ugh. It made strategic sense, so he couldn't refute it. The guardians also seemed to agree with Mong Muyak's opinion, nodding their heads in agreement to some extent. Since they were bound from moving through the air anyway, they had no choice but to respond strategically if they wanted to hurry. However, Mok Jayangun's thoughts were different. The strategy of using them as bait wasn't bad, but if they did that, those who became bait would essentially have to be prepared to die. In the past, these people would have been mere chess pieces to Mok Jayangun. Literally, if they had no use value, they were cards he could discard at any time. But now, things had to be different. As Changrayang had advised, to become a great master leading numerous people, he had to abandon the mindset of considering someone as a card that could be discarded at any time. Unless it was truly the worst situation with no way out, sacrificing allies would be a bad move for the future. So Mok Jayangan decided. No. All of you return as you are. What? Everyone couldn't hide their bewilderment at this unexpected decision. They were prepared to sacrifice themselves for their lord, even if it meant losing their lives as bait. My lord. How can you say that? My lord, you're no longer alone. How can you try to bear everything by yourself? Return. However, Mok Jayangan's will was firm. He judged that moving alone would be more efficient and result in no sacrifices than using them as bait. But right at that moment. There's no need to go to such lengths when there's a very safe and comfortable way to go. Everyone's gaze turned towards the source of the voice they heard from somewhere. The owner of the voice was none other than Chen Chu, the highest-ranking executive of the secret society. Unlike the others who had been traveling in a spacious carriage, she was tied to one of the demonic beast human's ankle claws. A woman as alluring and beautiful as her might have been tempting, but Mok Jayangan considered no one as a romantic interest except for one person, so he had treated her properly as a prisoner. What do you mean by that? When Siap Chen asked her, Chen Chu snorted and said, "Step aside, youngster." Again. As Siap Chen was about to draw his Jeep Mu sword in anger, Mong Muyak hurriedly stopped him. Then Mok Jayangan spoke in a disinterested voice. What do you want? At his question, Chen Chu smiled sweetly and said, You know what I want. She stared intently at Mok Jayangan and stuck out her tongue, licking her upper lip in a seductive manner. Seeing this, Siap Chen clicked his tongue. Crazy woman. They had wrapped her entire body in ropes except for her head to tie her to the demonic beast human's claw pillar, and it was rather impressive that she was trying to seduce in such a state. 6 days later. In a bamboo forest not far from the ruins of an old castle in the northern part of Shaanxi province. In the middle of a bamboo forest covering dozens of jang, a man wearing a bamboo hat was wiping blood off his sword blade while breathing heavily. Wipe wipe. Dozens of corpses were scattered around the man. Each one had lost their life to a single sword strike. One man who hadn't yet breathed his last opened his mouth with difficulty. Huff, huff. Betrayal. Is that what you're doing? So it is, betrayal, after all. Huff huff. That person will, never. Thud. Before he could finish speaking, the man in the bamboo hat thrust his sword into the man's head. The man couldn't finish his words and breathed his last. Looking down at the man, the bamboo-hatted figure shook his head slightly and muttered. No. It's for that person. Just as the man was about to sheath his sword after shaking off the blood from its tip, the man stopped and scanned his surroundings. Then, drip drip drip. Suddenly, blood from the dead bodies began to flow rapidly and start pooling. Even though dozens of people had died, this was a bamboo field, so the blood should have seeped into the ground, but it was a truly strange phenomenon. The bamboo-hatted man hurriedly tried to leave the area. Then, blood began to flow even from the surrounding bamboo, staining the area red. As an ominous spiritual energy, chilling to the extreme, filled the surroundings, the bamboo-hatted man could be certain of what this was. Ghost Intent Domain. This was a domain created by the spiritual energy of a high-ranking spirit with strong resentment. Chapter 433. The Ruins of an Old Castle. Part 3. The Ruins of an Old Castle. You know where that is, Ryu So-wul. A place where those who revered martial arts gathered to form a high castle. The foundation where the legends of the old martial arts world lived and breathed. Cough cough. Indeed, you know it better. So where is he? Don't think about deceiving me. If you do, you'll accompany this seat to the depths of hell. At Chang Ryang's threat, the Heaven and Earth Society leader coughed up blood, then gave a bitter smile and said, "Hell. If that's what you want, as a member of the Heaven Vein, I have no reason to refuse." Cough cough. But have you ever thought that the world we're living in now might be more hellish? I seem to have said something unnecessary. Ghostblade. Huh. Ghostblade reported that he's waiting in a bamboo forest not far from the ruins of the old castle. Bamboo forest? You mean a bamboo grove? That's right. If you take this on my belt, he'll know I sent you. Being unable to move due to being restrained by Chang Ryang's spiritual energy, he gestured with his eyes towards the belt at his waist. The society leader's token was attached to the belt. Seeing this, Chang Ryang suddenly recalled what Poison King Baek Saha had told Mok Jyangun when she was inside the wooden doll. He had said that while competing with him, he had asked to deliver that token to the society leader. Is that the medium through which the society leader can move Ghostblade? As Chang Ryang had reached the extreme of her rank and could directly affect matter with her spirit body, she easily collected his token. After collecting it, she asked, "But there's something I don't understand." Cough cough. What is it? About Ghostblade. He obtained the forbidden technique, so why is he staying there instead of sending it to you? At her question striking the core of the matter, the Heaven and Earth Society leader remained silent with a strange expression for a moment before speaking. That's 7 days later. Found it. As a spirit body, she could freely traverse the sky and didn't need to eat or sleep, so she was able to reach the northern part of Shaanxi province in just 7 days. If she could have fully exerted her spiritual power during the day as well, she would have arrived even faster. Even though she had reached the extreme of her rank, prolonged exposure to the sun, the peak of yang energy, would inevitably weaken her spirit body composed purely of yin energy, no matter how powerful she was. What are those? Unexpectedly, the bamboo-hatted man presumed to be Ghostblade was fighting with dozens of martial artists. However, seeing him, Chang Ryang couldn't help but be inwardly surprised. She knew he was one of the 8 stars, the highest masters in the current martial arts world, and that he belonged to the highest rank of the secret society, but this was unexpected. Swoosh! Swoosh! He was killing enemies with a single strike, aiming only for their vital points with minimal movement. There wasn't a single unnecessary or wasted motion. As long as no variables arose from the enemy's combined attacks, he efficiently killed most of them with a single sword strike. But what impressed Chang Ryang was that this sword technique had not a shred of defense. It consisted only of offense. It was a sword technique that risked one's own life to ensure the enemy's death, or rather, annihilation. A sword technique that disregards one's own safety. In a sense, he had mastered a truly dangerous sword technique. However, he was overcoming this single weakness in one way. He's a monster. He deflected all the enemy's fatal attacks with his sword. This was the first time she had seen such a perfect and extreme level of the pear blossom grafting technique. Now she understood why this person was called Ghostblade. But that wasn't what was important. Swoosh! As the bamboo-hatted man presumed to be Ghostblade killed the last enemy, Chang Ryang spread her ghost intent domain, the blood boundary. The conditions were favorable. Thanks to the tall bamboo forest, the surroundings were dark, and the area was overflowing with death energy from dozens of people meeting their end. Therefore, by properly utilizing these conditions, she could construct an even more powerful ghost intent domain. Her spiritual power, interlocked with the death energy of the surroundings, stained everything with blood, and soon the entire area was filled with nothing but a blood-red color. The reason she was binding him like this, despite having brought the society leader's token that could move Ghostblade, was due to what the society leader had said. It seems some problem occurred with him in the process of approaching the forbidden technique. A problem occurred? I don't know why, but I received periodic letters from him with the same content. The same content? That's right. What was it? Just this, I've gotten closer to the source of the forbidden technique. What? Exactly as I said. There were repeated reports stating that he had gotten closer to the source of the forbidden technique. How many times? 12 times. Dash. The Heaven and Earth Society leader said that Ghost Blade had sent secret messages with the same content a total of 12 times, almost every 5 days. Because there were eyes from the secret society monitoring, retrieving secret messages usually happened once a month, but as the Elder Council began to move in earnest, they were forced to retrieve them in the second month. When the 2 months' worth of secret messages retrieved in this way contained the same report at 5-day intervals, the Heaven and Earth Society leader couldn't help but find it strange. Originally, I planned to go there myself once internal matters of the society were settled, but now it seems you, Ryu So-woo, must uncover the secret of these repetitive messages. Recalling those words of the society leader, Chang Ryang came to one conclusion. Although she didn't know what the secret was, if Ghost Blade had betrayed the society leader or if some problem had occurred with him personally that would cause them to lose him, they wouldn't be able to find out anything. So, the priority was to subdue him somehow. With this in mind, she opened the blood boundary and moved the blood. Creep. Countless blood thorns sprouted from within the bloodied area. These sprouted blood thorns all rushed towards the bamboo-hatted man presumed to be Ghost Blade. Whoosh 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 whoosh. The bamboo-hatted man drew the sword he had half-sheathed against the incoming thorns. A flash of sword light flowed out like lightning, and in an instant, the red blood thorns covering the bamboo-hatted man split and melted back into blood. Yes, you should at least manage that much. Her rank was incomparable to before. While coming here without rest, her anger that had been burning like fire had somewhat calmed down, so her spiritual power wasn't maximized to the extent she had shown at the Heaven and Earth Society. But in her normal state, she had become powerful enough to face at least one of the 7 heavens. Splash! In an instant, 2 hands emerged from the blood and grabbed the bamboo-hatted man's ankles, pulling him. This caused the bamboo-hatted man to lose his balance and start falling backward. At that moment, spears made of blood shot out towards the bamboo-hatted man's hands and thighs. However, thud. Pat. The bamboo-hatted man, who was about to fall, arched his back, thrust his sword into the ground, and using it as a support, flipped his body while pushing off with his sword-holding hand to lift himself up. As the bamboo-hatted man swung his sword-formed fingers in that state, swoosh swoosh swoosh. Sharp sword energy flowed out, cutting through the spears she had created from blood. The bamboo-hatted man made a gesture of pulling with his hand, and the sword stuck in the ground flew out and was drawn into his hand. Tap. Gripping the sword, the bamboo-hatted man immediately unleashed sword energy in all directions. Swoosh 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 swoosh. The blue sword energy that flew out split the blood staining the surroundings, threatening to destroy the blood boundary. As it split, for a moment, part of the real world, the bamboo forest, was briefly revealed instead of the blood boundary, but soon the blood covered it again. Is this not enough? However, having confirmed that the world created by spiritual power could be dispelled by strong true chi, the bamboo-hatted man flew towards one area covered in blood. Rumble. The size of the sword energy emanating from his sword grew to nearly 5 jang. But it didn't end there. The sword energy that had grown so large began to condense, becoming an even deeper blue. That won't do. Realizing that he was trying to forcibly cut through the blood boundary by concentrating his energy to the maximum, Chang Ryang then swoosh emerged from the blood and manifested. Blood clung to the long pipe in Chang Ryang's hand, forming the shape of a sword. She gathered spiritual power infused with resentment into the blood-formed sword, and that energy was comparable to the condensed sword energy of the bamboo-hatted man. Just as the sword made of spiritual power and the condensed sword energy were about to clash. Hup. Suddenly, the bamboo-hatted man forcibly stopped swinging his sword. If one simply tries to forcibly stop while moving their body vigorously, the residual force of that action would directly impact oneself, causing strain on the body. Let alone in this situation, where he had raised his energy to the point of condensing sword energy, forcibly stopping it would. Crack. Crack. Along with the sound of muscles twisting in the bamboo-hatted man's body, the hand holding the sword began to shake violently. The palm gripping the sword hilt was torn, causing blood to flow. Chong Ryong couldn't understand his behavior. What on earth was his intention? So. Swoosh. Chong Ryong likewise stopped swinging the blood sword made of spiritual power. Unlike him who had a physical body, she, being a spirit body, didn't experience strain from stopping the force she had exerted. Chong Ryong, who had stopped the blood sword right in front of the bamboo-hatted man's neck, asked with puzzlement. "Why did you stop your sword?" At her question, the bamboo-hatted man, who had been silent for a moment, finally spoke. "So you really were freed?" "What? For your rank as a vengeful spirit to be this high in just a mere 100 years, was it your own will that freed you rather than contact with an avatar?" At the bamboo-hatted man's words, Chong Ryong's expression hardened. The ghost blade she knew was supposed to be a highest-ranking executive of the secret society, but for some reason, he had aligned his intentions with the Heaven and Earth Society leader. But judging from the way this person was speaking to her now, it seemed as if he knew something. "Who are you? What exactly do you know about this seat? Having just been freed from the seal, the fact that you, who should be burning with resentment, came all the way here means you must have known that person is still alive and well, and that there's been a setback in the society leader's plans." At his words, Chong Ryong's eyes sharpened. She had thought that even if she went a bit further, it would only be related to the death of Jang Muno, Mok Jianun's grandfather and the society leader, but it seemed that wasn't the case. To show this level of insight, being able to grasp the situation to this extent with just simple information, one would need to know a lot. Eventually, the corners of Chong Ryong's mouth lifted. "It seems I'll learn a lot if I make you open your mouth. Choose whether it would be better for me to force it open or for you to open it yourself." Swoosh. Chong Ryong showed him the token she had received from the society leader. Seeing this, the bamboo-hatted man presumed to be Ghost Blade maintained silence for a moment. Then, letting out a faint sigh, he said, "The fact that you brought that means you either received it willingly from him or forcibly took it. If it were the latter, how do you think I would have known your location? Even that person, now that he's close to the traces of the forbidden technique, finding this place is no longer difficult." The bamboo-hatted man gestured with his chin towards the corpses scattered on the ground. The fact that these people had come here meant that even the secret society had finally discovered traces of the forbidden technique. "Humph, then if I say I know about you repeatedly sending the same secret message, would you think it's the former?" "Repeatedly, sending the same secret message? What do you mean?" The bamboo-hatted man frowned, asking in a tone of incomprehension. At this, Chong Ryong said, "They say you kept sending secret messages repeatedly saying you've gotten closer to the traces of the forbidden technique. This should be enough. You. Why are you acting like this?" As the bamboo-hatted man showed signs of bewilderment, Chong Ryong couldn't hide her puzzlement. The man was quietly repeating something, and it sounded like he was saying it can't be. Why on earth is he acting like this? At that moment, woong woong woong. Chong Ryong looked around with surprised eyes. This was because she was still maintaining the ghost intent domain, the blood boundary, but she could see the surrounding spaces suddenly bending. Wondering what this phenomenon was, eventually, crack 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 crack. Surprisingly, beyond the space distorting, her blood boundary was forcibly shattered. She had prided herself on how difficult it would be to break easily due to her strength and spiritual power, but what on earth was happening? Even the bamboo forest revealed after the blood boundary broke was bending. What is this? As she was puzzled, the bamboo-hatted man presumed to be Ghost Blade spoke. Though it looks like a simple bamboo forest, this entire bamboo grove is one big formation. You're saying this is a formation? Not just a simple formation. If you look at the positions where the bamboo is planted, it's composed of highly advanced formation patterns, not just one but hundreds concentrated together. It's a formation that you can neither enter nor exit unless certain conditions are met. Don't tell me this is. Yes, this formation made up of the bamboo forest is the entrance leading to the traces of the forbidden technique. At that very moment. Crack, crack, crack. The space of the bamboo forest that had been bending completely twisted into a vortex shape, and then Chang Ryong and the bamboo-hatted man were sucked into it. Swoosh! And the moment the vortex's distortion ended and the space returned to normal, the bamboo-hatted man was suddenly standing alone in the middle of the bamboo forest. As a gentle breeze blew, causing the bamboo to sway and its leaves to flutter and fall, the bamboo-hatted man, hit by this, quickly scanned the arrangement of the surrounding bamboo and muttered softly, "I've finally found it. I should send a secret message." Chapter 434. The Ruins of an Old Castle. Part 4. Squeak. It's too dizzying. And the pain feels like her spirit body is being burned. Where on earth is this place? As Chang Ryong looked around, she noticed something strange. She was trapped in a jade window made of rare silver wood. Because of this, due to the silver wood's power to suppress resentment, she couldn't move properly and the pain persisted. Ugh. Even while suffering, Chang Ryong looked around to determine exactly where she was. But she realized a new fact that she hadn't noticed before, being too focused on the silverwood jade window. Could it be? Everything around her was enormous. From a huge inkstone to brushes, numerous medicine jars, and large books. All of these were larger than herself. It might have been confusing, but due to the giant surroundings, she could recognize one fact. That is, have I shrunk? It seemed similar to when she was sealed in the wooden doll of mortals. The difference was that while the wooden doll just confined her, this was almost like torture. The purifying power of silver would not only weaken resentment but could ultimately extinguish it. This could be considered the worst crisis for her. No. Judging that she couldn't stay trapped here, Chang Ryong, though in pain, tried to raise her spiritual power to break the silver wood. Even if her body had shrunk, there was no way that she, a vengeful spirit who had reached the extreme of her rank, couldn't destroy this level of silver wood. Rumble. Crack, crack, crack. Aakak. Chang Ryong, who had been raising her spiritual power, had to stop due to pain that felt like her entire spirit body was being torn apart. Staggering in agony, Chang Ryong couldn't understand. It might be understandable for a low-ranking vengeful spirit, but she had already reached a rank no different from high-level Imi Manjiang. So why couldn't she release her spiritual power? As she wondered about this, she suddenly discovered something and her eyes widened. It was because talismans forming a formation were attached to the bottom of the silverwood jade window, that is, on the desk, centered around her. But there was something strange about these talismans. She had seen many talismans while being with Mok Jiangun. However, these talismans had even more complex phrases and patterns engraved on them than those. Perhaps because of this, even the spiritual power emanating from the talismans themselves was extraordinary. All of this seemed to be organically connected with the silver wood, preventing her from recklessly releasing her spiritual power. Damn it. Chang Ryong held her throbbing head and recalled what had happened earlier. The space of the bamboo forest had twisted like a vortex, and she had been sucked into it. Crack. Eventually, her vision brightened and her surroundings changed to a wide grassland covered in green. Faced with this sudden miraculous event, Chang Ryong was momentarily at a loss for words. Where on earth is this place? No matter how advanced the formation techniques have become, how could such a wide grassland be hidden inside a bamboo forest? As Chang Ryong was puzzled, something caught her eye. It was a thatched cottage in the middle of the grassland. Oh my! At that moment, the bamboo-hatted man presumed to be Ghost Blade showed a somewhat bewildered expression. So she asked, "Why? Is this not the place?" "This is certainly it." "Then why are you reacting like that?" "This déjà vu is a first." Déjà vu? Déjà vu. It's a phenomenon where a situation or environment that one has never experienced before feels familiar, as if it's something one has gone through before. At the bamboo-hatted man's words, she too felt something strange. Come to think of it, this mortal was said to have sent the same secret message 12 times. as if each time was the first time sending it. Could it be? Chongrang looked at the bamboo-hatted man with widened eyes and opened her mouth. You, perhaps? This is quite interesting. Chongrang turned her head in surprise at the voice coming from somewhere. How could she, with her extremely heightened spiritual sense, not have noticed someone approaching this close? 10 steps behind her was someone leaning on a silver cane with a jade ring. That someone was none other than a beautiful woman. She had long blue-black hair, distinct eyebrows, round eyes with slightly upturned corners that reminded one of a cat. What is this? Chongrang's eyes filled with wariness. How could she not have noticed such a being approaching? The energy emanating from the woman was so vast it was impossible to measure. In terms of energy alone, she even surpassed the sentient beings. How could such a being? Swoosh! At that moment, the blue-black-haired woman muttered something and extended her cane. In that instant, Chongrang couldn't hide her bewilderment. She felt her spirit body stiffening like stone. Then, whoosh! At that moment, the bamboo-hatted man presumed to be Ghost Blade moved his body so quickly it caused spatial distortion. In an instant, he closed the distance to the woman and tried to cut off the wrist of the hand holding the cane. However, clang! The bamboo-hatted man's pupils shook. This was because the woman, without moving a single step, caught his sword barehanded, even though he had swung it with the power of one of the 8 stars, considering the opponent strong even if she hadn't raised her energy. Feeling that this wouldn't do, the bamboo-hatted man hurriedly tried to raise his strong energy, but, tremble, crack, kook. The tip of the sword blade caught by the woman trembled, then the trembling spread to the entire sword, and then, as if the wound on his already torn palm had widened further, blood burst out. This wasn't the end. Along with the blood bursting, the bamboo-hatted man's body was pushed back, for as much as 10 steps. Rustle. If he hadn't applied true chi to his Yangchen point, he would have been pushed back even further. Centered on the soles of the bamboo-hatted man's feet where he had stopped, the surrounding grass on the ground rotted and then crumbled. What is this? The bamboo-hatted man's eyes narrowed. The moment he felt energy climbing up his palm, he thought he should let go of the sword hilt. Not stopping there, he felt he should unconditionally release the energy that had penetrated his body, so he sent it out through his Yangchen point. If he hadn't done so, he would have been injured internally by this strange energy. The bamboo-hatted man raised his head and looked at the blue-black-haired woman holding his sword blade. Again. As déjà vu struck, the bamboo-hatted man frowned. Then, the blue-black-haired woman raised the corner of her mouth and spoke. Isn't it fascinating how your body remembers? What? What are you talking about? Why are you denying it? Even if your mind doesn't, it's natural for your body to remember if you've experienced this. Remember, with the body? Then indeed. The bamboo-hatted man's gaze sharpened. He had felt something strange due to the words he heard from Chongrang and the peculiar déjà vu. But that strangeness became certain because of what this woman was saying. It seemed that his memory was not intact. Convinced of this, the bamboo-hatted man spoke. Is this the 13th time? At his question, a glint appeared in the blue-black-haired woman's eyes. Have you perhaps regained your memory? What have you done to me? One of the woman's eyebrows raised. Then, swoosh! The woman's figure blurred and suddenly appeared behind the bamboo-hatted man who had been pushed back. The woman who appeared behind the bamboo-hatted man instantly used the grappling hand technique with her left hand, twisting his arm behind his back and pushing him forward. Thud. The bamboo-hatted man's expression contorted. What on earth is happening? No matter how swift the woman's movements were and how impressive the grappling hand technique was, it was impossible for him to be overpowered so helplessly. Just who is this woman? Pack. The blue-black-haired woman's hand touched the back of the bamboo-hatted man's head. Sensing a cold energy penetrating the moment her hand touched, the bamboo-hatted man hurriedly tried to raise his internal energy. However, my internal energy isn't gathering. Strangely, strength doesn't easily come. Come to think of it, he had felt something was off earlier, but the internal energy in his body wasn't circulating properly according to his will and was moving on its own. It's not undone. What? You still don't remember, so how did you know the number of times you've been here? At her question, the bamboo-hatted man kept his mouth shut. He thought it was more important to focus his mind on correcting his inner energy that was running wild rather than answering something. Then the blue-black-haired woman sneered. Kakik. You're doing unnecessary things. No one can exert their own power here, child. Of course, even if you could exert your power, it wouldn't make much difference. What? What have you done to me? Well, what did I do? You're already guessing, aren't you? Did you make me lose my memory of coming here? Hoo. The woman laughed softly at this question. It meant affirmation. At this, the bamboo-hatted man became quiet. After learning the answer to his question, he seemed to become even more calm, considering how to break through this situation. Then the bamboo-hatted man spoke in a cool voice. I didn't enter this place to threaten you. You came to obtain the forbidden technique that can unite the soul and spirit. The bamboo-hatted man was at a loss for words. He had tried to take the approach of persuading her, but with this answer, it became certain. Although he couldn't remember, he had clearly taken this approach before. And he must have failed. Why are you silent? If you know that, and I have no memory of it, it means persuasion is meaningless, right? You understand well. At her answer, the bamboo-hatted man inwardly became confused. Based on the situation so far, a few things had become clear. That he couldn't obtain what he wanted through persuasion, and fortunately or unfortunately, for some unknown intention, she could kill him but only made him lose his memory and sent him out of the formation. Why? For her too, the continued repetition would lead to annoyance. So why does she keep repeating this? As he wondered, he heard the woman muttering. If it weren't for the promise with that person, it would be easier to just kill you and be done with it. TSK. What are you saying? Grip. Hup. At that moment, the woman strongly gripped the back of the bamboo-hatted man's head. Then she said, I don't know why all your memories aren't erased, you mutant. Thanks to you, I'm not bored. Come again. Pack. At that moment, the bamboo-hatted man's head fell forward and he lost consciousness. The woman, gripping the back of his collar, lifted the bamboo-hatted man up, then repeatedly struck the ground with her cane while softly chanting what seemed to be a spell. Then, crack. Part of the space began to distort as if swirling. The woman then pushed the bamboo-hatted man, whom she was holding by the collar, into the distorted space. As the bamboo-hatted man's figure disappeared, the distorted space returned to normal. Move. Seeing this, Chongryan tried to somehow raise her spiritual power to move her body. However, her spirit body, once stiffened like stone, didn't budge at all. She couldn't understand what was happening. Then, the blue-black-haired woman who had made the bamboo-hatted man disappear approached, raising the corner of her mouth in a sinister smile, and said, It's truly a good day. I promised not to kill, but there was no mention of not touching dead resentment to begin with. You. What exactly are you? She's a monster with immeasurable martial prowess and even strange techniques at her disposal. She had never heard of or seen such a being, either in life or after death. As she was at a loss for what to do, the woman who had approached right in front of her spoke in an excited voice. Even in the old days when I was outside, I had never seen such strong resentment. I didn't expect such luck to come my way. Rumble. Chongryan tried to somehow ignite the resentment within her to raise her spiritual power. The blue-black-haired woman approached her and casually lifted the chin of her spirit body, saying, It's useless, child. Although she was in a threatened position, Chongryan, not one to be intimidated, retorted with a voice full of killing intent. The child would be you, wouldn't it? You mortal. Kakik. Indeed, as expected of a high-ranking resentment, you're not easily intimidated. Given your rank, you must have been a vengeful spirit for quite a long time, so you might know of my prestige. Prestige? Ha! It's laughable that she's spouting such nonsense, overconfident in having restrained her, when she's just a mortal who won't even live 100 years. If you know this prestige, you could say you've lived in a similar era to me. Humph. Well then, let's hear how great this prestige of yours is. Wicked Granny.